delay, Mayor. We're ready to go now.
Thank you, Porter. Well, welcome everybody to our August 4th, 2020 Lawrence City Commission meeting. We are going to get started, but before we do that, we're going to hear from Porter about the process for this meeting this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Porter Arneal, and I'll be facilitating the Zoom video portion of the meeting tonight. With me is Sherry Riedemann, City Clerk. She'll work alongside Mayor Ananda to facilitate the meeting proceedings. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found on the lower left-hand side of the Zoom menu next to the video icon. Muting your microphone during the meeting will make it easier for everyone to hear. You'll just have to remember to unmute if and when you want to speak. In some cases, I may mute or unmute people as needed. Each time you speak, please remember to state your name and title for the benefit of those listening remotely. In the menu, you can also turn your camera on or off by clicking the video icon. For the purposes of this public meeting, please keep your video on during the meeting. If you're participating by phone, you can click *6 to unmute your phone. For those using Zoom, somewhere on your screen you will see a choice to toggle between speaker and gallery view. Speaker view shows the active speaker. Gallery view tiles all the meeting participants. And now I'll turn it back over to Mayor Ananda.
This is Mayor Ananda. Thank you, Porter. So we will take roll before we hold the meeting to order. Vice Mayor Finkeldei?
Here.
Commissioner Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Here.
Commissioner Larson?
Here.
All right, and we are all present and accounted for. Before we jump into the agenda, we will hear from our City Clerk, Sherry Riedemann.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to go over a few reminders to ensure that the provisions of the Kansas Open Meetings Act are met. Commissioners, you must state your name and title each time you speak. All motions will need to be stated clearly. After a motion is made and seconded, the mayor will call on commissioners individually to provide their vote. Mayor, you will then need to announce whether the motion carried and the count of the vote. Various members of city staff are present via Zoom, and they must also state their name and title each time they speak. Individuals who signed up in advance to provide public comment remotely will be called upon by name. When you are called on, please unmute your listening device and state your name before speaking. The regular 3-minute time limit will apply. The mayor will then call for in-person public comment for those individuals without access to technology. Staff present will direct you to the podium to speak, following social distancing and safety protocols, and the regular 3-minute time limit will apply. Thank you.
Mayor Ananda, thank you, Sherry. So we are ready to jump into our agenda for this evening. The first item on our agenda is to approve the agenda. The City Commission reserves the right to amend, supplement, or reorder the agenda during the meeting. Are there any modifications that a member of the Commission would like to make to the agenda? We have a motion.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldei. I move to approve the agenda.
Mayor, this is Commissioner Shipley, second.
This is Mayor Ananda. We have a motion from Vice Mayor Finkeldei, a second from Commissioner Shipley. Vice Mayor Finkeldei?
Aye.
Commissioner Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Mayor Ananda, aye. That passes unanimously. We are ready to move on to our recognitions, proclamations, and presentations. Again, while we always want to recognize exceptional work in our community during the coronavirus pandemic and with our commitment and for compliance with the Kansas Governor's Order, individuals or groups will not be allowed to attend the Commission meeting to make remarks and receive their proclamations. Instead, we will be promoting these proclamations on our social media, and I've seen a few of those on social media already today. We have 2 proclamations. One is to recognize the 100th anniversary of the MU chapter of the Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity. And the second is to proclaim Thursday, August 6, 2020, as Hiroshima Day, and Sunday, August 9th, 2020, as Nagasaki Day. So please look for those on our social media and take a look at those proclamations. Next, we will move on to our consent agenda. All matters listed below on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Consent agenda items are eligible for live public comment. Individuals wishing to provide live public comment must register as outlined at the top of the agenda. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes. Are there any items that a member of the commission wishes to remove from the consent agenda? Okay. Do we have a motion?
This is Commissioner Larson. I move to approve the consent agenda.
Vice Mayor Finkeldei, second.
This is Mayor Aranda. We have a motion from Commissioner Larson, a second from Vice Mayor Finkeldei. Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Finkeldei?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Commissioner Shipley?
Aye.
Mayor Aranda, aye. That passes unanimously. We are ready to move on to public comment. The public is allowed to speak to any items or issues except those scheduled on the consent agenda or regular agenda portions of the agenda, after first being recognized by the mayor. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer these items to staff for follow-up if necessary. Individuals should address all comments and questions to the commission. Individuals wishing to provide live public comment must register as outlined at the top of the agenda. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes. I believe that we had one individual signed up for public comment, as well as some communications which are included within the agenda. The person who wished to speak who signed up was Stephen Watts. Please go ahead, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. Are you receiving the video? Are you
Yeah.
receiving the video? Excellent, very good. 4 items. Number 1, the town is on the verge of passing an immigration ordinance, and I'm confused about why you're so pleased about it, because when you get into the language of the ordinance itself, it gives total control to when the police act to the police. When they want to manhandle people on the streets of Lawrence, Kansas, they can. They just simply say, it's an emergency, and then they'll notice all of us here in the town when practical. I'm confused by that language. Why is it being allowed? Next, we move into, the 8 Can't Wait campaign. On June 9th, Mayor Ananda spoke eloquently about being bold maneuver. Here we are 2 months later, and the police in Lawrence can still chokehold people to death and can still carotid artery people to death. What's the problem with stopping it? What are you waiting on? I am looking at the correspondence that Brandon McGuire has indicated to Mr. Owens, and it doesn't really speak to it. Then we go into, what are we going to do about the police union running a black man out of town? Nobody knows what happened. When are we going to find out about any of this stuff? Then we go back to the police consultant that is most current. Why are we going to bring in a police consultant with the exact same mindset, a friend to the police department, rather than provide an objective analysis for the future? These are questions that have not been answered either via email or by the commission. Do you just think that it's going to go away, Ms. Ananda? Do you think that your politically correct speech patterns are going to change behaviors? Let's just stop right here. Please make a motion right now to ban chokeholds and carotid artery holds by our town police department. Mr. Owens is the chief of police under the charter of Lawrence, Kansas. The commission just simply tells him to direct current acting chief of police, Anthony Brixius, to implement this policy. I don't understand why you haven't done it. And the report coming back, it's not available. The Police Review Commission didn't opine on it. Thank you for your time.
Mayor Ananda, thank you. Is there anyone present in the commission room who would like to give public comment?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. We are ready to move on to our regular agenda items. This evening, the first item is to consider approving a special use permit, SUP 2133, for gas and fuel sales on approximately 2.08 acres located at 6300 Bob Billings Parkway. And we need to disclose any ex parte communication on this item. We should go ahead and do that. I think I have none to report. Other commissioners?
Commissioner Larson, I have none.
Commissioner Bowley, I have none.
You remuted.
Was I muted? Sorry. Commissioner Shipley, I have none.
Vice Mayor Finkeldei, I talked briefly to, I just forgot his name. I meant to write it down.
It's me, Doug Rainey.
Thank you, Doug Rainey. I spoke briefly to Doug Rainey about basically just the overall things that are already in the agenda packet.
Ms. Mayor Nanda, thank you for disclosing those items. Oh, Commissioner Bully, did we hear from you?
None, thanks.
Okay. Do we have staff presenting on this item?
You do. Sandy Day, Planning Office. This proposed request is for gas and fuel sales to be located on the northwest corner of Bob Billings Parkway and Langston Way. Project occupies just over 2 acres of a 15-acre CN2 district known as Langston Commons. The area has been zoned for neighborhood commercial development since 2013. The application is the first of several that will build out this district. The zoning requires this particular use to be at neighborhood scale, and the proposed use is permitted in the district, but because of the vehicle orientation of the use, a special use permit is required for this activity. Property was recently replatted to create a parcel included in the request, and the minor subdivision has since been recorded with the Register of Deeds office. The proposed project includes a 4,817 square foot building with 8 fuel lanes. The project on West 6th Street, recently completed by the applicant, has 6 fuel lanes, just for comparison. Project also includes an access driveway to Langston Way along the north property line that will be shared with future commercial development as the area builds out. Direct access to Bob Billings Parkway is prohibited. The access is restricted by the subdivision plat. The proposed driveway along the north property line provides necessary separation from the intersection of Langston Way and Bob Billings Parkway. This will be the third Casey's project in Lawrence, and the proposed building is the same size as the building that was constructed along West 6th Street with 2 more pump islands than the West 6th Street site has. The proposed project complies with the development standards of the Land Development Code and the Commercial Design Guidelines as described in the staff report. The entire CN2 district property will include future intersection improvements. As part of the recent minor subdivision, the property owner was required to execute an agreement not to protest the formation of a benefit district for a future traffic signal. Traffic signal would likely be required as future development occurs within this area, depending on timing and intensity of the development. Planning Commission specifically discussed emergency access to the site. The site is designed to meet fire department standards for access. Emergency apparatus can reach the site via public streets from the north from West 6th Street or from the south from Bob Billings Parkway along Langston Way. Single shared access drive along the north property line will be connected to other internal access ways and parking lots as this area builds out. Project is located near a multi-use path and includes pedestrian connections to the public sidewalk and paths in the area. Almost 0.7 acres of the site will be left in open space along the rear of the building and may provide other opportunities for additional pedestrian connectivity. Special use permit. The site plan will function as the enforcement tool of the development. There's no recommendation for a time limit for the special use permit. Your commission packet should include communications both in favor and opposed to this development. And the conditions noted in the staff report have since been met since the Planning Commission considered this item at their meeting on June 24th. Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation to this body with a vote of 6-3, which is why it is on your regular agenda. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
This is Mayor Nada. Thank you. Are there any questions for Sandy? We have no one signed up for public comment on this item. Is there anyone in the commission room who wishes to give public comment on this item?
No, Mayor.
Ms. Mayor Nada, thank you. So this is back up to the committee.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldei. Does the applicant get to present, or is it just?
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Jeff Lawbender, SBB Engineering. I'm the civil engineering consultant for Casey's on this project. Did want to clarify a few things. Sandy did a great job in her presentation. I did want to clarify the fuel pumps. I believe she mentioned that there was 6 on 6th Street. There's actually 10 pumps or a total of 20 fueling positions. In our proposal for this site, there's 7 pumps for 14 fueling spots. So it's actually a reduction of 6 fueling positions, and it's a single row of pumps rather than double. This building is very similar. It's the same proto that is on 6th Street. I will kind of go over a few items that were mentioned in the Planning Commission meeting. One was the fire access, and there only being one access. As Sandy mentioned, the fire department did review our circulation plan for the fire truck, and any paved area is within 300 feet of the building, which is the typical requirement when looking at fire access. Casey's would love to have, another entrance or exit on Bob Billings, but getting KDOT or city approval for that would not. There are other locations that are kind of set up this same way that only have one entrance into the site and exit. The store in Shawnee off Woodland and Johnson Drive, that was constructed, probably 10 years ago. And there's multiple other locations that we could also point out for an example. One of the items that was brought up in the Planning Commission meeting was screening between this project and the residential to the north. There is quite a distance from the Casey's north property line to the residential. There's 588 feet between the north property line and the south right-of-way line of Renaissance Drive. So there's almost 2 football fields of length, this property to the residential to the north. One of the other items that was brought up was pedestrian safety. If you look at an aerial map, there is sidewalks on both sides of Langston Way. So any pedestrian traffic that would go, for instance, from the residential homes to Corpus Christi, that was one example mentioned in the last meeting. They could actually travel or walk on the east side of Langston Way and then turn the corner at Langston Way and Bob Billings and walk down the north side of Bob Billings Way, and you would never cross a driveway or the intersection of Langston Way and Bob Billings. And as Sandy mentioned, in the future, as this 15 acres of commercial develops, could be a traffic signal which would provide additional safety measures at that point. I believe I hit on kind of our key points, and Mike Bryant, and I think the owners of the property and the seller's engineer are also part of the Zoom meeting if you had any questions for us.
Mayor Nanda, thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions for Jeff or the owners of the property or others who are present? Okay.
Mayor, I might have a question for Jeff or Sandy, but nothing specific for the people doing the project. Sorry.
This is Mayor Nanda. Thank you. I think that we are ready for a general conversation on this item, so please go ahead.
This is Commissioner Shipley. Again, this might be more for Jeff and Sandy. You've done a really great job on this. There was, if I recall, a little bit of discussion at planning about how these things fit in Plan 2040. So one of my questions is, one of the things I think staff identified was Plan 2040 does indicate broader use of businesses and neighborhoods. Absolutely. My question might be about like food deserts. Would we sometimes inadvertently create food deserts by not creating space? I see that this area is surrounded by potential school district land and potential city land. I just wonder, how do we safeguard against something like that? And do you, Jeff, feel, the great expert in Plan 2040, do you feel like we might be leaving ourselves open to something like that?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services. It's a very good point to bring up, I think, Commissioner. I don't know if this project would preclude a future development in this area that may kind of have that kind of food component to it. I think this could be paired with one of those, if that should arise at one of those development locations. So I don't think that one would preclude the other. It is something that I think we're kind of looking at from the planning side of things, but I don't know. There's a lot of economics that go on with siting of grocery stores and things like that. So I'd hate to venture out and say this would be a good site or not, but I don't think that the inclusion of this would preclude that either.
Thank you, Jeff. This is Commissioner Shipley. I'm comforted and not at all surprised to know that you're thinking about those things. Thank you.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldei. I was on the Planning Commission back at the time we zoned this whole area, and so it's been a long time that this intersection's been sitting commercial. Obviously, it became a lot more valuable when the 15th Street interchange opened, but still, that's been a while. And I mean, I'm excited to see the first development in this commercial location. I mean, obviously, 15th and Bob Billings is where we want, some commercial activity, I believe. And I think it's consistent with our plans. And I think this sets up in a good location that will hopefully draw some new development shortly after this one is built. So I certainly support this plan and look forward to it moving forward.
This is Mayor Nanda. If folks have more that they want to add, otherwise I would ask if anyone wants to make a motion.
Did we have Commissioner Larson, did we have public comment?
This is Mayor Nanda. We did. It was prior to the presentation from the developers, but I believe that there is no one in the commission room. I would have asked again if that had been indicated. So thank you for asking.
Okay, this is Commissioner Larson, and I make a motion to approve the special use permit SUP 20-00133, permitting a gas and fuel sales use located at 6300 Bob Bailey's Parkway, subject to the conditions listed in the body of the staff report. Adopt on first reading ordinance number 9780.
Vice Mayor Finkeldei, second.
This is Mayor Nanda. We have a motion from Commissioner Larson, a second from Vice Mayor Finkeldei. Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Finkeldei?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Commissioner Shipley?
Aye.
Mayor Nanda, aye. That passes unanimously. We are ready for item 2. Thank you for your presentations. Item 2 is review resolution number 7329, the temporary right-of-way program for the downtown Lawrence, and provide direction to staff as needed.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I'll be reviewing this item with you this evening. Back in mid-June, which seems like a very long time ago, but was just a few weeks ago, the Commission approved Resolution 7329. This resolution set up a temporary right-of-way program and made some modifications temporarily to some of our sidewalk dining to enable businesses in the downtown commercial district to be able to expand into the right-of-way, both close to the building and also upon signing an agreement with the city into some of the parking space that would be in front of their building. Part of the request also was to approve a temporary parking plan for downtown, which was implemented in early July. Based on feedback that we had received on the temporary parking program, that was a lot of concern from the business community about a negative effect that they saw on their business with effect of the parking. The parking was returned to the normal angled parking in mid-July. However, this resolution continues to be in place, which is supporting that temporary right-of-way program. And we do have a number of businesses that have utilized the program. At the last check, we had about 16 businesses that had signed up and are utilizing the program. I've heard and I'm aware of very little negative feedback about this. Most of it has been positive feedback that I have heard about the temporary right-of-way program. When the commission approved this back in June, you all had set up an end date of October 31st for the program. And when you took that action, you'd indicated a desire to review this at this meeting this evening. So that's why the agenda item is before you. So I think from a staff perspective, we've seen good results from this. It appears to be doing what was intended. And we're certainly interested in any feedback that you or the public have this evening for us. And I will note that on the call here this evening or on the Zoom meeting, we have available Enrico Villegas, who is the right-of-way manager for the city, and David Cronin, the city engineer, as well as Brad Harrell, the city's parking manager, who can answer any questions about either this right-of-way program or any parking issues that might arise this evening. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Fair enough. Do you have questions for any of the staff who were mentioned on this item?
Mayor, Commissioner Shipley, one of the things I'm curious about is I understand that staff has been keeping some kind of data on what's been happening with the parking. So I have some kind of concerns about that. I don't know if you want to kind of wait and see how our discussion goes, or if you want me to try to ask those of Brad now.
Just Mayor Nanda, I'll leave that up to you.
Okay. This is Commissioner Shipley. So this is for Brad. I understand you were keeping some kind of data about usage even during this time when we weren't enforcing. Is there anything you can tell us about that would help us or show us what's happening when we're not enforcing right now?
Yeah, so this is Brad Harrell, parking supervisor. We've been doing occupancy counts on Mass Street, the parking lots in our garages 3 times a day. Right now for Mass Street, we're currently occupied around 51% throughout the different times. And back the last time that we did an occupancy survey was 2015. that generally is at 71%. So about a 20% variance there. For our parking lots, we're currently occupied around 47%. And back in 2015, that was 59%. The biggest kind of discrepancy here is our parking garages. They're currently being occupied at 25%. And back in 2015, that was 53%. So we still have a substantial amount of parking available, and especially in those long-term parking garages.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldei. Kind of following up on that question. Again, walking downtown, I generally agree with those numbers. It certainly seems down from where we traditionally have been. I have heard a few complaints about, maybe employees who used to be parking in the long-term lots are now just parking on Mass Street and staying there all day. I'm not sure what, if anything, we can do about that, but do you have any thoughts about, as you do those counts, if you're seeing the same cars or anything like that?
Yeah, we're really trying to utilize the data that we're collecting and try to make an educated decision on when parking enforcement should, be reinstated. Right now we're just kind of getting those trends. There's, no set date that, magically is the right time to start enforcement. I mean, I have received a little bit of complaint from business owners regarding certain vehicles that have stayed over that time limit. The data does suggest that there are potentially people that would generally park in the long-term garage that are now utilizing kind of that, short-term area for potential customers. So, I think that, collectively we can continue to look at this data and try to make, the most educated decision we can on when enforcement would be right to continue. Right now we can see from our occupancy surveys that our numbers are down. So, I think as we look at trends and that starts to rise, it'd be a good time to start, considering coming back with some form of enforcement, whether that's on a limited capacity or limited dates and things like that. But it's certainly something that we're monitoring right now and looking for that spike when it would be most beneficial to begin again.
This is Mayor Nada. Can I follow up on that really quickly? When that count was taken, was that when students were in town? And have you reassessed that? I mean, the students, only some of them are back at this point, but move-in was very recently. And so I'm guessing that tracking that once they return will impact kind of how we assess that.
That's a great question. The 2015 occupancy survey was actually done in July, so it just lined up perfect for our numbers here, where we have a very normal comparison between the two. So comfortable with that. It can be anticipated that certainly we'll see a spike when some form of the students start to come back, and we can continue to monitor the situation and see if that changes drastically.
Nanda, thank you.
Mayor, Commissioner Shipley, I wanted to kind of point out also to the Vice Mayor, not just that employees might be, and even owners might be taking advantage of that. I've heard that too. But also don't forget, people live downtown. There's residents down there, and they might also normally be parking in the garages and taking up those spaces. Sort of defeats the purpose of what it sounds to me like, especially the retail owners are wanting. Mayor, can I just ask kind of another question of Brad? I feel like we learned from the study, and we're kind of constantly told, especially by people who visit here, that we're already undercharging for our parking compared to possibly peer areas. How would that factor in to your feeling about enforcement or beginning enforcement? The fact that our parking is quite affordable.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And, obviously the charging the right cost for curbside parking has a huge impact on the type of turnover you have. And I think that, that's something that we're working towards in 2021. to move those prices to where we can really encourage more of that turnover. But from a strict standpoint of having people that are or maybe potentially being considered as employees or residents that are abusing the short-term parking, I think that something we could consider some type of solution of maybe enforcing the meters and the time limit parking lots, and then potentially leaving the parking garages open or free. And that would encourage a substantial amount of those residents or employees of downtown to park in our parking garages, utilize that long-term parking, and then open up, those most desirable parking spaces, for retail and of course dining. So I think that is one potential solution that, the commission could consider doing, to really encourage those long-term parkers to go to our long-term areas.
Mayor, this is Sherry Reedman, City Clerk, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but Brad, could you just please state your title? I just want to be clear that your name and title that you've been answering the last few questions.
I apologize. This is Brad Harrell. I'm the parking supervisor.
Thank you.
This is Mayor Nanda. Are there other questions? Go ahead.
Mayor, I might do one more. So I don't think I've ever met Enrico, but I'm interested that he's in charge of the right-of-way permits. I was kind of talking to Diane, trying to understand this. The restaurants can, of course, apply to use this right-of-way permits. I guess anyone can. But the angled parking that is left, it seemed like some of them had applied to have their own 2 spots, let's say, in front of their building. And I found that a little bit confusing. And Diane did kind of explain it to me, but I just thought for the benefit of everyone, we should maybe all have a clear understanding. Because I don't normally understand the spots in front of your building don't belong to you. They're a public good and we're all using it. This is a unique circumstances and we made some specific changes. So I didn't know if Enrico wanted to talk about it or if maybe Diane wanted to clarify that.
This is Brad Harrell, parking supervisor. I can speak to that. So currently, if you're talking about just Mass Street, we have 14 businesses that have reserve stalls totaling 28 total stalls. The reason we offered this as an organization was when you have free parking, as we kind of touched on earlier, obviously if those stalls are full, it makes it very difficult for restaurants and some retail too to do a curbside pickup. And so what these stalls were intended to do is when we happen to be busy in downtown and they're trying to grab a pizza and go, if you will. If there's no stalls available, it's going to be very difficult, especially if a restaurant is doing kind of a curbside drop-off or pickup. Then they're the employees are bringing that that food out to the car, and so that's why these stalls were intended. They're intended for that reserved spot where someone can come out. Right now, if you take all of downtown into consideration, we have 25 businesses that have reserved stalls. And that totals 49 total stalls. When all of that's kind of added together there, we're really only looking at about 14% of our on-street parking is displaced due to reserve stalls. And of course, right now, as you had earlier mentioned, the stalls directly in front of the business are not reserved or owned by the business. But they are intended for those businesses to utilize for their customers.
I'll ask another one, Mayor. Commissioner Shipley. Maybe this is for Diane, or maybe if there's anyone who was with engineering. Some of the things we were talking about when they were designing this was the safety and the safety of the barricades, which some people think are very unattractive, but I understood served an actual safety purpose for people who are in the parklets. Does staff or engineering, anybody feel like that now that we've seen it and it's here and we're using it, that it is safe and appropriate for those situations?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. David Cronin, do you want to take that question?
Sure. Dave Cronin, City Engineer. We do feel that the Jersey barriers or the barricades that are out there, the orange ones, those are water-filled barricades that are relatively easy to install and move around, but they do provide some good physical protection for those that are behind them and using the space. So we do feel those are appropriate to use, and we have been allowing folks to be able to wrap them or decorate them or whatever if needed, if they'd like to improve the aesthetics of them. So certainly, we could utilize other type of materials to barricade off the area. We haven't had anyone that I know of that has been opposed to the using those barricades. But I do think those provide pretty good physical separation versus just using paint and delineators. So hopefully that answers your question.
This is Commissioner Boley. I haven't observed the Jersey barriers on the side streets, on the east-west streets. What are we doing to assure safety there?
Dave Cronin, City Engineer. I can't speak to any of the design of the side streets. I don't know if anyone else in staff has update on what's going on with the side streets, but.
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I don't know that I have any. That space tends to be a little more narrow than the space that's along Mass. And I don't know, Enrico, if you have any comments on those side street locations or not.
This is Enrico, Right-of-Way Program Administrator. Commissioner Boley, that's a good question. And I think that's something that we can evaluate. So I'll take a look at that and then go from there.
This is Commissioner Boley. I appreciate that because I am concerned.
Mayor Nanda, any other questions before we open it for public comment? Okay, we had one person signed up for public comment today. Emily Peterson, please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you to the Commission for this wonderful program. My name's Emily Peterson. I own Merchant's Pub and Plate with my husband, TK. And this has been just an invaluable opportunity for us. To expand to outdoor dining is a lifeline, really, when it's safer to be outdoors than indoors at this time. And I believe it's essential that we continue to have this support of the Commission to be as nimble as possible as our community, adapts and responds to the COVID concerns. And I also want to say thank you to the city staff for their help with implementation of this program. They have been so wonderful and supportive and making sure that the businesses that are taking advantage of these right-of-way permits have what they need to do it successfully. We are on a numbered street, and we created a 3D full barrier to help with the safety aspect. And I'll just be interested to see how that evolves as the city staff continues to evaluate, what's necessary there in terms of materials. And then I also wanted to add that with the recent changes to revert the parking, excuse me, I hope that this program continues to be sustainable. The parking felt like maybe one of the biggest barriers to a successful implementation. And now that we've reverted and things have calmed down a little bit, it feels like the access to downtown is a little bit more equitable, feels more welcoming, that this can be a sustainable program well into the fall. And we urge the Commission to continue the course. Thank you.
Ms. Mayor Nanda, thank you. Sherry and Portier, is there anybody in the Commission room who would like to give public comment on this item?
No, Mayor.
I believe Porter said no, Mayor.
Gosh,
He was muted.
apologies. No, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, well, we will bring it back to the commission then.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Larson here. I just wanted just to say a few words, and I really appreciate how this program has evolved, and that everybody's remained flexible enough that they've been given an opportunity to voice their concerns about the parking aspect of it, which is where I had a strong concern. So I'm really glad to see how it has worked out. And I believe it seems to me that we've addressed a lot of the issues that were brought forth by some of the retailers, and then also, allowed those to move forward that want to move forward. And I think they're getting really creative, and I really appreciate the work that they're putting into it. So this is something I can support, that's for sure.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldei. I would echo those comments. Certainly, leading up to the last vote, we had quite a bit of negative reaction, and then the negative reaction only increased in the following weeks. But I appreciate staff's work, the community's work, the downtown merchants' work in making the changes that really have brought this program around to what is working. I've tried in these last 2 days to circle back with some of the people who had complaints originally, and had complaints certainly in those first few weeks of July, just to see what they think of the current setup. And actually unanimously, they all appreciate what is going on now. They feel that there's a good balance between parking and the use of these stalls, that they're actually helping bring people downtown. And so the people I'm hearing from certainly support the current configuration, and I do too. As Commissioner Lawson said, I've been very impressed with some of these outside creative spots, and I think they're going to be useful as we head into the fall. As I did that, I did ask that same question about that we talked about earlier, about whether they felt about enforcement of the traffic of the meters. And again, I think they're basically where the discussion was earlier, that it's probably not enough traffic right now today to start enforcing, but they are hopeful that in the next couple weeks, as students come back, as the weather gets nicer and more people come out, that we'll be at that point that we need to consider doing some sort of enforcement. And obviously then I also got the comments about some long-term uses of the spots. But anyway, overall, I'm very supportive. I think we should continue this until October 31st, and I think it's a big benefit for downtown.
This is Mary Nanda. I'll reflect that for sure. I think that we knew going into this wasn't perfect. It wasn't the solution, and we've continued to evolve this over time, which is exactly what is our responsibility to do, to continue to support our downtown. So I'm pleased that it is where it is, and I'm certain that this isn't the end of where it is. But I'm confident that we'll be able to continue to improve this over time.
Mayor, this is Commissioner Shipley. Is anyone else interested in the suggestion of weighting free parking towards garages? I hadn't thought of that, and I think it's quite brilliant. Did anyone else find that an interesting idea?
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldei. I do think, yes. I mean, I like the idea of starting back with meters first before you start the rest of the enforcement. I certainly think that could change some of the long-term behaviors. Whether or not that's, this month or early in September or 2 weeks from now, I'm not sure the numbers, where the numbers come out on that. But I certainly think looking at that phased approach would be a good place to start.
This is Mayor. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Larson.
This is Commissioner Larson. Yeah, I would definitely consider it. I would like to think about it some more and maybe get a little more information, but it does seem like a good way to layer and just slowly get things back to some semblance of where we were, even though I don't know if that's going to ever happen again. But yeah, I'm definitely interested.
This is Mayor Nanda. I thought that it was an interesting concept to consider doing the spots on Mass Street as 2 hours, so doing or hour and a half, doing the full limit of the meters to prevent that long-term parking. And so essentially turning it into a 2-hour lot so that folks aren't there all day, and then having the garages remain free. That almost seems like another interim stop that could be part of that. I also think that there's room for just reaching out to the LI and our other downtown businesses and saying, hey, this is inappropriate use. You're using your customer spots. They're having a harder time accessing you. Please park in the garages or in the long-term lots as we've done. I don't think that there's any harm in kind of restating that.
Mayor, this is Commissioner Shipley. Does staff have a threshold in mind? And again, bearing in mind that we don't know what normal looks like anymore. We've got these kind of great statistics, 51%, 47%. What does staff recommend as a threshold or percentage that you're going to see that's going to ask you to start enforcing more or making a change to enforcement?
This is Brad Harrell, parking supervisor. I think we just got to continue to really analyze this data and make an educated decision down the road. But before any type of return of enforcement, I recommend we delay that by at least a month, so that we can really work on that comprehensive communication plan to our community, all aspects of our communication avenues to really let people know. And then I would also recommend some form of maybe a soft rollout with enforcement, more of a warning and educational standpoint to let folks know that, something that hasn't been enforced since March 17th, that it is going to return. So I encourage the City Commission to really think about, we've already had the conversations about what this communication effort might look like. So we're not completely in the dark on that, but I do encourage that we give plenty of time to really work towards notifying everyone that enforcement will be resuming. But to answer your question directly, I don't know if there's a set occupancy percentage that is right, wrong, or indifferent. I think we can just continue to look at uptrends, and when we, and then also hear, complaints from business owners or the community about how, potentially that abuse of the 2-hour, meters are continuing to be a problem. Then we can really, make that decision down the road of when we need to reinstate it.
Mayor Nanda, anything else from commissioners, or do we want to make a motion? I suppose, do we need to make a motion, or is this just providing direction?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. We really don't need a motion on this. We just wanted to hear any direction, or if you had a desire to somehow end it early. The resolution does currently have the program going through October 31st.
This is Mayor Nanda. Do you feel like you've received sufficient direction?
Yes, I believe so, Mayor. Thank you.
Mayor Nanda, thank you. Okay, with that, we are ready to move on to item 3 on our agenda. Consider reaffirming the evaluation and consideration for the need for historical markers, consideration of historical marker requests, reconsideration of any memorials, monuments that may need historical evaluation, and make recommendations to the City Commission on these matters as the responsibility of the HRC.
So again, Mayor and Commissioners, Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. So this item is in the context of a letter that the city received from Christopher Rice, whose brother, Nick Rice, was killed in Lawrence on July 20th in 1970 amid all of the various unrest that was happening in the community at that time. And he was requesting an appropriate monument in honor of his brother be erected in the letter that you have included in your packet. We had responded to him and had indicated that we would get back with him about how that may be handled. And there was some recent correspondence with the city manager and Mr. Rice indicating that there would be an item on your agenda this evening. In looking at the city code, it does appear that the Historic Resources Commission does have in their purview the consideration of these types of monuments. But we wanted to see if there was any additional direction given the context of this particular request as it related to some of the other boards that the city has, in particular, perhaps the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board or the Human Relations Commission. And also another thing that staff had discussed was, as you know, a few days prior to the death of Nick Rice, Rick Tiger Dowdell was also killed in Lawrence. And I'm not aware of any, certainly there's not been any recent requests that I'm aware of, and I'm not aware of whether there had ever been any historical requests for any monuments related to Mr. Dowdell. But that could be an example of something that perhaps would be appropriately considered by the Historic Resources Commission or any other commission that was looking at this issue. And in the staff report this evening, we did also point out that there have been several other community efforts that have been ongoing here in the last year or so related to whether some additional markers in the community should be established. And in particular, the NAACP has been working on a memorial that would appropriately recognize the victims of the lynching that occurred in Lawrence in 1882. And as you know, there's been a group that has been looking at the history of the Shunganunga boulder in Robinson Park. And I know that both of those efforts have been discussed with the City Commission and have been well on their way in terms of process and visiting with a number of parties. So that may be part of the question this evening for the Commission, is whether any of these boards should be involved in the review of those issues as well, or should those continue on their course since they have been working for some time. But we did want to seek some clarification as to whether you wanted to refer the request of Mr. Rice and other related issues to the Historic Resources Commission. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure there's other staff that can as well. Thank you.
Ms. Marinata, thank you, Diane. Are there questions for Diane or staff?
Commissioner Larson here, I do have a question for Diane. So the process that to go through in order to get historical marker, is that an administrative type approval, or would that go through all the way up to the City Commission?
In the city code, in the chapter 22 that's cited in the memo, the responsibilities of the Historic Resources Commission, one of those items is providing recommendations to the City Commission related to appropriate historic monuments and in the community, and transition of some of those monuments from one historic district to another. So those would be something that would come, could be referred to that particular commission, and then could come back to you all in the form of a recommendation.
So when you say could, does that mean it will, or just that there's some administrative approval involved where what you request?
Yes, I'm sorry. Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I'm not aware of any administrative policy that we have or any other additional guidance beside the rather broad guidance that's provided in the city code related to this. So that's part of the issue that we wanted to talk with you all about this evening, was whether you felt that that this kind of request was appropriate also to be reviewed by any other boards.
Commissioner Larson, thank you, Diane.
Mayor, if I could, this is Tony Wheeler, City Attorney.
Please.
I just wanted to respond a little bit to Commissioner Larson's question. I have been working with representatives of the NAACP and others who are working on the monument or the marker with the EJI project. And we did speak with Lynn Zollner very early in the process about what sort of historic review would be necessary for that project. And she represented at the time that that it would be an administrative review by her, that particular project. So it very well might be specific to the project and location, but our initial inquiries with Lynn represented that that project would be reviewed for Historic Resources Commission review at the administrative level.
So Commissioner Larson here, so that means that the process would be that approval could be obtained by administratively without it ever going to the commission, city commission. Is that what I'm understanding, Tony?
Jeff may be able to shed greater light on this. I was just trying to represent what we were told by planning staff for that particular project. Based on the marker is a relatively straightforward marker. There is not a lot of additional infrastructure that's required for it. Lynn wanted to review the text of the marker to make sure that it was historically accurate, but she represented that that was pretty much the extent of the review for her on that particular project. I would defer to Jeff to speak about the code more generally.
This is Mayor Nanda. I just want to remind folks to state your name and position each time we speak.
Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services Director. If I remember the code correctly, and my computer's giving me a little bit of a moment here, so I can't quite get it on my screen, but it would be an administrative review by staff. And typically when that occurs, that is just for the historic resource component of it. It is usually brought up for further approval by the governing body in that instance there. So it'd be basically kind of staff would review it for the historic component of it and pass along that administrative approval to you, so you would have that knowledge to go forward, is my understanding of the code.
Commissioner Larson, thank you, Jeff.
This is Commissioner Boley. Before I go too far, I probably ought to disclose that I'm on the NAACP History Committee, so I'm very interested in the project. And I appreciate that we have a need to send these things to the Historic Resources Commission. I think that's appropriate. And I guess my question is, are you recommending that the NAACP project be sent in a different direction than it's going now, which would essentially take it backward?
Commissioner Larson, who are you talking to, Stuart?
I think Diane, I guess.
Okay.
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I think that was one of our questions for the commission. It did appear that that these groups were fairly far along, although, as has been pointed out here, there may be some administrative review as to the appropriateness of the size of the marker and other details, whether or not you want to refer this to the Historic Resources Commission to review. It did appear that already there was there appeared to be interest at the commission level in looking certainly at the monument that was proposed by the NAACP.
This is Mayor Ananda. I'm curious if other cities tend to use the same process that we do, or if it is really kind of arbitrary and depends on the city. And then, what is the level to which we are required to go through that review, and what would be kind of the minimum that we would do for that review?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I'm not aware of, I haven't looked at exactly what other cities have done with this, and I don't know whether Jeff Crick or others that are here from staff might be able to comment on that. I'm sure that in some cases, some cities have elaborate processes that relate to monuments and policies and things like that that are established, but some others might want to comment on that.
Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services Director. There's a couple that kind of come to mind that I've worked with in the past. One was a very lengthy process that went through many reviews and then ultimately was approved by the governing body. I've also seen instances where it was reviewed and approved by the local historic commission, and that was the ultimate deciding that went to those items there. There are some other instances where I've seen that depending upon where they're at, it may require the Department of Transportation for the state to ultimately review and approve depending upon a couple of different items, if it's on a highway or a federally listed street. So it really varies from place to place in my experiences.
Ms. Mayor Nanda, thank you. Craig, I know you've been in several locations. Do you have any experience that you could bring to the table?
City Manager Craig Owens, not that many locations, I mean, my experience, and really the reason to bring this forward is this is a national conversation about monuments and reconsidering the appropriateness of them in areas that are, in the southern parts of our country, so it's just really to kind of renew your understanding of how these should be dealt with. I think a lot of times park boards become a part of this. Those are frequently a body that's done, and a lot of times some cities just don't have a historic resource commission like we do to look at those. So it really can be done however we want to do it here, and I'm glad that we kind of found an understanding of how the code contemplates we process these, but it's just really a renewed understanding because this has become, more pronounced, and we did have, a letter and a contact from Mr. Rice that I thought rose to the level that we should definitely address it and understand also how we're consistently going to go about this. So I think you can really do it however you'd like to do it. And we certainly have a number of avenues for community conversation and processing these kinds of requests and considering them.
This is Mayor Ananda. What I meant to say was reasonable and professional number of communities you've been a part of.
Thank you.
I do think that's fair, and I think that, it's something that is vitally important, and I think it would be helpful kind of knowing what best practices are or what are some of the factors that other communities consider. I guess that's more in the direction piece, and we haven't had public comment. Are there other questions? Okay. Why don't we go ahead and do public comment on this item? We have 2 individuals signed up to give public comment on this item. Carrie Almgren, please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, just a second. I'm trying to get my timer here. Just a quick restating of what I said in my communication to the commission that you should have in your packet. I think just leaving these important issues up to the Historic Resources Commission may not be the best way to do it. There could come a time when there would be a challenge to what they were saying. And of course, obviously the City Commission could deal with that. But I think the Human Relations Commission should be part of these kind of discussions, because the lynching marker is something that happened a long time ago, and no one is alive who was here at that time. There are descendants, obviously, but no one's alive. But the killing of Nick Rice and Tiger Dowdell was 50 years ago, and there are a number of people who are still alive. So bringing in the human relations part, I think, is important, at least on certain ones. You may not want that for marking 150 years, but for 50 years, I think that's extremely important. And it's important that I'm glad Lawrence is talking about this now, because for a long time we've ignored a lot of the less than stellar history. And with Chris Rice's letter, I think it's opened up a door for discussions like this, not just how do we want to deal with markers, but how do we want to do with the human side of this? How do we deal with the families, and how do we deal with the people that are still alive, and make sure that we consider making sure that justice is done into certain things, certain aspects of these events. Many people don't believe that justice was done in the Nick Rice and Tiger Dowdell cases because of the way things were handled back then. And so I think this is a golden opportunity for the city to start looking at those and think maybe we should do even more than just talking about markers or monuments. So as I said, I think opening it up to more, and I have nothing against the historic resources, but I think that adding that level of human interaction would be much beneficial in the long run. Thank you.
Mayor Nanda, thank you, Carrie. The other individual that we have signed up for public comment on this item is Chris Flowers. Please go ahead, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Chris Flowers. I also sent in comments, so I guess that's what I sent in is how I feel, but I'm just wondering what all counts as a monument, like the Women of Color mural. I mean, I could see it counting as somewhat of a monument since we put up pictures of women that some would consider heroes, and they're on the side to kind of immortalize them in Lawrence history. And that, I want to say, it went up to the Cultural Arts Board, I think, at some point, or there was talk about it. So I was also wondering, like, when it comes to monuments that also have an aspect of art to them, what if maybe Lawrence Cultural Arts Board should have a say? And how I think it should work is, let's say, here's an idea. Let's say I have an idea for a Trump memorial, and it's going to be a fire hydrant that's made to look like Trump, and it gets put in a dog park for dogs to pee on it. Now, where would I go? Which board would I go to for that monument to Trump? I mean, going to the historic resources would seem, I don't think they'd go for it. Actually, none of them are probably going to go for it, but I think I'd like to be able to take it to human relations, and I think they should have a say. I think I should be able to take that idea to whichever, I'd say 4 boards: human relations, historic resources, Lawrence Cultural Arts, or the Parks and Rec. I should be able to go to any of those boards, whichever one I think my project for the memorial fits best. And if I can get any of them to approve it, then it comes to the city commission, and then they can redirect it to go to one of the other boards, or maybe just vote on it right then and there. And then when it comes to reevaluating our monuments, I'd like both human relations and historic resources to be able to look at it, and I'd like it to pass before we take stuff down. I think that it should have a higher threshold to reach than making something new. So I think it should pass both and then go to the city commission. And also, like, when it comes to the rock, it's not just an issue of do we give the rock back, which I think we give the rock back. The bigger issue is, do we replace it with something, or do we just completely take that monument down? So anyway, those are just some thoughts I have. Thank you.
This is Mayor Ananda. Thank you. Porter, is there anyone present in the commission room who wishes to give public comment on this item?
No, Mayor.
Mayor Ananda, thank you. So we will now bring it back up to the commission. Go ahead.
Mayor, Commissioner Shipley. I do like the idea of hearing from both groups. However, I do want to acknowledge kind of something that Commissioner Boley said, and I'm certainly someone waiting for a monument might feel, which is it would add a layer of bureaucracy that just takes up time, especially, you know, if you're someone who's looking at a 50-year anniversary and the timing is really important to you. But also they could have a subcommittee, an HRC, just, you know, they send 2 people, or they also have the Cultural Arts Commission and they review it together to save time. The other thing that I would say that's good about that is that it creates more knowledge in the community. You know, we've got 40 something boards. The more people you get in those meetings, the more information gets disseminated out into the rest of the community about these kinds of projects. I don't know. How do you feel?
This is Mayor Nanda. I'll throw my 2 cents in there because I think you're right. I don't want to give these individuals and groups more hoops to jump through. I think that doing that would be detrimental to the process. I do like the thought of having factors to consider when we're looking at these, whether it's reviewing the ones that exist or considering new ones that are consistent with our strategic planning process. And I like the thought of a subcommittee, although I'm loath to recommend a subcommittee, but having folks from all of those groups so that we're not sending them to, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 groups to have these conversations with those recommendations coming to the commission possibly. But I don't feel like I'm at a point where I have a broad enough understanding of the implications of implementing any of these processes. And I would definitely like to hear back from folks who have engaged in this or are engaging in this or will engage in this process if it felt and was accessible.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldei. I would, I guess, follow up on that. I guess it depends probably what would, you know, as Chris Flowers pointed out, what are we talking about here? I mean, I know if we're talking about should historical markers go to the Historic Resources Commission, I'm okay with that. I think Mr. Aldebrand pointed out a good point. Is something that happened 30 years ago or it happened yesterday, is that history or is that human relations? I know that the Parks and Rec, I mean, the Rotary Arboretum, you know, when a member of our Rotary Club passes away, we buy a tree for them and we have a marker that marks a tree that's a memorial to a Rotary member. And so I know Parks and Rec has several places where you can buy a bench or buy a, you know, again, that's a kind of a different process. So not to get sidetracked of what we're talking about here, and I think the purpose of it, but I do think in general, those may be various paths that any particular request, depending on what it is, maybe it should go through different processes. You know, to the extent it's something that's, historic, so I certainly don't have any issue with things that are claiming to be historic going through the Historic Resources process. But again, I do agree with Mr. Aldebrand that history versus human relations is something we should look at and maybe allow for either of those possibilities.
Commissioner Larson here, and I guess I would echo some of that. But I would caution that we make whatever pathway that is decided how this works is that it doesn't muddle the ability for a historical marker to be put up in our community to the point that it frustrates whoever's trying to get this done. So I would just ask that we look at that to make sure that it's a very clear definition as to who has to do what in order to get or to go through that process. And in that regard too, then the idea, what I'm concerned about is that that it does come to the city commission at some point, so that we can do a final say based on everything that's been done before, a recommendation from whatever boards that is done. I would just want to make sure that we see the end product before and vote on it from the city commission standpoint.
This is Commissioner Boley. For those of you who are under 50, the events here in 1970 are history. For Mr. Altenburn and me, it's more like current events. So I'd like to suggest that we have these go to the Historic Resources Board with notice to the other boards so that they can know what's going on in that board. For example, Parks and Rec may be interested in going and talking. Some of the members there, some of the Human Resources Commission members may be interested in going to the Historic Resources Board to talk. But instead of having multiple layers of review, I think we should just go to the Historic Resources Commission and then have the City Commission have an opportunity to make the decision.
This is Mayor Ananda. I would like to, I seriously consider your recommendation, Commissioner Bully. I think that for me, I would feel more confident giving direction, having a broader idea of the implications, and certainly having more of an opportunity for a public conversation around this. Again, particularly for folks who have engaged in this process or are engaging in this process. Before giving concrete direction. And in the meantime, these projects that are in process, maintaining, the process that we've used so that we aren't providing more bureaucracy to wade through as they go through that process.
Mayor, this is Commissioner Shipley. I want to just make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying, let's let these things we've already been talking about in this community for a little while, NAACP, the Big Red Rock, let them continue on the course they're on, but continue having a discussion if some of us think a joint HRC meeting about a particular monument that might come up might be a good idea in the future. Am I understanding you?
This is Mayor Ananda. That is a correct and accurate reflection of my statements that are far more succinct.
This is Commissioner Boley. Mayor, what would you recommend we do with this request from the Rice family?
This is Mayor Ananda. So I think that because this request has been we've been knowledgeable about this request for a while. I think that continuing it through the process that exists as well would be reasonable, just so that they have access to that. It's not changing under their feet, and they can continue moving forward with that. Would that be reasonable?
I guess my question is, who would be advising the commission on this then?
This is Mayor Nutter. Are you talking about the Historic Resources Commission or the City Commission?
The City Commission.
This is Mayor Nanda. I guess I'm not sure that I quite understand your question.
This is Commissioner Boley. We've received essentially a new request from Chris Rice, I believe. And this is not something that's been in process. It's a new request. And the question is, what do we do with this request? My suggestion would be that we refer it to the Historic Resources Board and let them advise us on it. But I'm open to what you might suggest out of.
This is Mayor Nanda. Yeah, I don't think I was clear. I do think that they should go through that process so that we aren't shifting the sand under their feet as they're trying to go through that process. Even though it hasn't been begun, the city has been aware of it, and so I think it would be fair to maintain the process that exists.
Mayor, it's Commissioner Shipley. I don't know. I see Jeff there, but I don't see Lynn. How does the HRC's timeline work? Can they get to this in a timely fashion? They've already been waiting.
Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services Director. The HRC meets monthly. I believe their next meeting is canceled because they don't have any items to consider, but they do meet monthly. So we'd get it on the next cycle as available for the meeting schedule, which I believe would be about middle of September. It'd be about the third Thursday in September, I believe.
This is Mayor Nanda. Could they have a third Thursday of August meeting if they were aware that they now have an agenda item?
Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services Director. I'd have to double check that. I believe we'd have to give legal notice, which we might be too close to the meeting date to meet that requirement. But I'd have to double check that to be sure.
This is Mayor Nanda. It seems like that would be preferable given the amount of time that they've been waiting for some kind of response or guidance on this item.
Mayor, this is Commissioner Shipley. I'm assuming that looks like Jeff's looking it up right now. I do want to say none of this is a slight to Parks and Rec. The Parks and Rec Board is fantastic, and they have a lot of knowledge, and indeed they put up different kinds of monuments, statues, benches, and things all over town. I just think HRC, Historic Resources, they have a historian. That research is what they do. And so, you know, I'm glad Vice Mayor Finkeldei brought up Parks and Rec. By no means a slight to the work that they do. I just think I would like to see definitely the other good thing about historic research is then, you know, you disseminate knowledge about the story. So I appreciate what a historian can bring to the conversation.
This is Mayor Hernandez. So it looks like our action this evening is to refer the Rice Memorial request to the Historic Resources Commission for review and consideration, reaffirm the work of the Historic Resources Commission to include the evaluation and consideration of the need for historical markers, consider other historical marker requests, consider any memorials, monuments that may need historical evaluation, and make recommendations. So I guess what's before us tonight is to decide whether we're referring them to the HRC. It sounds like I'm hearing consensus around that. And then this next sentence in this action piece is confusing to me. And I've read it aloud twice now, and it still doesn't make complete sense. Reaffirm the work of the HRC to include, so are we then affirming that they're going to evaluate and consider the need for historical markers, to continue to do that, to consider other historical marker requests and what that encompasses, and then any memorials or monuments that may need historical evaluation? Is that the reevaluation of the existing monuments that that we've kind of touched on in our conversation? Is that accurate?
Mayor, this is Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I apologize for the confusion of the wording on that. I think that we did want to pose the earlier question that I mentioned, which was the general context of this request in the light of other activities that had occurred in 1970, and have the Historic Resources Commission weigh in on that, which would also be in their purview. But that was some of the intention there. And I see the city manager also looks like he may have a comment too.
Thank you.
City Manager Craig Owens. Yeah, it really, obviously this hasn't been a conversation I think has come before the City Commission, and it took us a little while when Lynn popped up that, hey, we do have a process in this. And I think it seems like a time in history when it was appropriate for us to reaffirm that the existing code and ordinance does give us guidance, and just want to make sure that continues to be your intent, and that will be useful in the work that the community has before it now and in the future.
Mayor Nanda, thank you for kind of clarifying that. I wonder, as we've tasked the Human Relations Commission with reevaluating our ordinances, that maybe this is something that we can kind of lift for them to take a look at to see if there are implications that perhaps we haven't considered or aren't considering by running it through one specific advisory board, if there are risks or implications for existing monuments as well through that ordinance, et cetera. Are there thoughts on the possibility of that? And to clarify, it would be maintaining until we get a report back from the Human Relations Commission in regard to review of that ordinance.
City Manager Craig Owen, so you're saying this would be something specific that would be in the general charge that we talked about over the last couple of months for some of the work, the 12 points or the review of our ordinances related to racial equity and that work. So,
yes, that's correct.
Okay. City Manager Craig Owens, yes, we will include that in the review of those committees. We'll ensure that is part of the review.
This is Mayor Nanda. Are there thoughts on that possibility from the commissioners?
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldei. As I said earlier, I do think there could be a role for the Human Relations Commission in it. And so, I'm comfortable with, as you said, going forward now with the Historic Resources Commission. They're probably the appropriate board in most situations. But if we want to look at it in a broader context, I think it's worth looking at and maybe seeing what some other communities are doing. But yeah, I'd be generally open to that.
Commissioner Larson and I would agree with Brad Finkeldei on that, Vice Mayor on that.
This is Mayor Nanda. Are there any opposing thoughts, ideas, feelings, arguments to moving forward in that way for now? Okay. Does that feel like an appropriate understanding of the action recommended by the commission under item number 3 on the agenda, Diane?
I think so, Mayor. I think it might be helpful if the commission might be willing to put it in a motion to staff, and it looks like Jeff might have some information that he might want to share about timing too.
Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services Director. Diane, thank you. The board was scheduled to meet August 20th, but that meeting has been canceled at this time. However, the chair of the HRC can call a special meeting and giving appropriate time, place, and manner of notation of the meeting. So if the City Commission would like to have a meeting scheduled like that, we could advise the chair of the Historic Resource Commission to call a special meeting to provide the guidance on that item there. So that would allow us to have that as part of their bylaws.
Just Mayor Nanda, thank you for responding to that. For me personally, I would request that they call a special meeting to address this simply because of the weight that these folks have had in getting this discussed. 100% acknowledging that it's not on the HRC's shoulder that this is the case, but they are the appropriate body for addressing this. Are there thoughts on that?
Commissioner Shipley, I would also really appreciate if they could see their way to doing that.
So the request is that we make a motion. I will make an attempt at that. and y'all can correct me when I'm wrong. I move that we refer the Rice Memorial request to the Historic Resources Commission for review and consideration, and that the Historic Resources Commission continue the evaluation and considerations for historical markers and historical marker requests. And that the ordinance number I don't have that in front of me. The ordinance in which these historical markers are reviewed and considered be considered by the Human Relations Commission in regard to implications for equity and access in the language of the ordinance. No? Yeah? Help?
Vice Mayor Finkeldei, I thought that was pretty good. I'm looking at Commissioner Boley, though, to make sure. No, I thought that was good. I think it's chapter 22, 205.
Yeah.
This is Commissioner Boley. Could I make a friendly amendment or suggest a friendly amendment that we have the HRC also consider any memorials, monuments that may need historical evaluation and make recommendations to the City Commission on these matters?
This is Mayor Ananda. And by HRC, I believe that you mean Historical Resources Commission.
The Historical Resources Commission, yes.
This is Mayor Ananda. I wonder what other commissioners' thoughts are on that. Thoughts?
Commissioner Larson, I would support that because I do think that they need to look at this. We need to have an historical evaluation, and that's where our historians are.
Vice Mayor Finkeldei, I guess, yeah, I think we should head in that direction, although, again, maybe at some point we'll be considering that process, but for now, I think that's the way to go.
Okay, I will agree then.
So
go ahead.
This is Commissioner Larson. I'll second that motion if that's a valid motion.
Sherry, is that a valid motion with a friendly amendment?
Sherry Riedemann, City Clerk. Yes. I would just ask, we may need another little amendment. Tony, do they need to include the call, the request to the HRC to call for a special meeting in that motion?
I think that could be a separate motion.
Okay.
After they vote on this, just to keep it clean.
Clean. Okay. Thank you.
That was City Attorney Tony Wheeler.
City Attorney Tony Wheeler. Sorry.
Okay, so we have this is Mayor Nanda. We have a motion from Mayor Nanda, a second by Commissioner Larson. I vote aye. Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Finkeldei?
Aye.
Commissioner Shipley? Aye. Commissioner Boley?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Do we now need a second motion for this item?
City Attorney Tony Wheeler, I recommend that you do have a second motion where you request that the Historic Resources Commission call a special meeting on the pending request.
Thank you. This is Mayor Ananda. I would move that we call on the Historic Resources Commission to move forward on the letter from Christopher Rice requesting the city consider placement of a monument recognizing the death of his brother, Nick Rice, who died in Lawrence on July 20th, 1970 in the month of August.
Second.
It's a motion from this Mayor Nanda. There's a motion from Mayor Nanda. A second by Commissioner Shipley. I vote aye. Commissioner Shipley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Finkeldei?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Commissioner Boley?
Aye.
This Mayor Nanda, this is passed unanimously. We good on item 3? Sherry?
Sherry Riedemann, City Clerk. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, we are ready to move on to commission items. Are there any future agenda items that a member of the commission would like to add? Are there any future work session items that a member of the commission would like to add? Any other items from commissioners?
Commissioner Larson here, I do have one item that I would like to discuss a little bit. And it involves sidewalks. So I promise we won't get into a long conversation about it. But as we all know, we have these areas that we work in. We've divided our community up into areas. And right now we're working in the southeast part of the city, repairing sidewalks in that area. Something that brought to my attention is that, obviously we still have our complaint-driven system where you can complain about somebody's sidewalk that's not necessarily in that area anywhere in the city. And then the property owner is required to repair that sidewalk. Well, it's been brought to my attention that since this program has been going on, that some of the property owners that have been required to do the repairs would qualify for the low-income portion of the program, wherever it's located at, wherever they're doing the program at the time. So I would like for the commission to have a discussion or consider the prospect of possibly allowing folks who aren't necessarily inside that area, who are low income and who are being required to repair their sidewalk because of a complaint, to access the money for low income property owners. Provided obviously the funding's available and we can do it at a reasonable price. So I just want to have a discussion about that, because those sidewalks are going to eventually need to be repaired. And it seems like historically, at least the past 2 years we've done the program, and there's been quite enough money left over in that low income portion of our funding that we could possibly include that in when that happens, when there's a complaint regarding a sidewalk.
This is Mayor Nanda. I agree that needs to be a conversation. I too have been contacted by an individual experiencing that. And I do wonder what we can do to remedy that. It seems pretty inequitable to not have access to that. I also understand that there are reasons that those programs are available in the areas that we're working in, but I think it's worth further conversation.
I just want to thank my fellow commissioners for pointing out the myriad ways that this program is inequitable. And we've known since the beginning of this program that those things did not apply to people in other areas, not just the potential to use funding if you needed it, but also not to have access to the same crews, right? They're on the other side of town, you're on your side of town. You're not able to get the economy of scale. So I thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner.
So Mayor Nanda, it sounds like three of us are interested in continuing this conversation. Commissioner Larson, are you recommending that it come back as an agenda item, as a study session item?
Commissioner Larson here. I would like to if possible, have Craig take a look at that, or have staff look at that to see financially whether that's going to be feasible to add that on. And then and then at that point, if we feel like we need to have a motion to do that, I'm all for that. Have it as a actual agenda item. I'm fine with that too. But I'd like for staff to take a look at it just to see the feasibility of it.
This is Commissioner Boley. I support the conversation. I think we need to have it. I'm concerned about people who meet our low-income guidelines for the program as we have it, not being excluded because of the geography. If we're requiring people fix their sidewalks and they don't have the resources to do it, we have the money. I would suggest we bring this back as a regular agenda item because I think there's some urgency to it. And I'd hate to have the delay of a study session and having to reschedule it as a regular agenda item.
This is City Manager Craig. This is City Manager Craig Owens. So I believe that we can, we'll work on, see if there's a feasibility in there and financial impact. And if it looks like something that we can put together that sounds like it meets the needs that are here, we'll bring it back for you for a regular item. If it needs some better clarification and direction, or if there's some bigger obstacles that we need your direction on, then we would, we will offer that up. But we understand the urgency to act and take a look at it. So Commissioner Larson had given me a week headway on it, so we did start kind of poking around on it. But we will try and bring back something quickly, some options for the commission to satisfy that. And if it is just something that we believe that we can do and undertake, we will just bring it as a city manager's report item.
Mayor Nanda, thank you. Is that satisfactory to you, Commissioner Larson?
Yeah, Commissioner Larson here, that's great. Appreciate that.
Any other items from commissioners? Commissioner Shipley?
Mayor, this is Commissioner Shipley. I'm not sure if this is going to require Sherry or Tony, and I know you guys have talked about it in the past about the timeliness of the written minutes. And so, like, this evening, we accepted minutes from a month ago, and sometimes we even see projects coming from planning where we can see the video. If any one of us wants to see what happened, we can see it any time, but the written minutes aren't out. And I just want to be sure with staff that that's okay, that things moving beyond, a month beyond without the written minutes is still in comportment with all the rules that we have.
This is Sherry Reedman, City Clerk. Are you talking about commission minutes?
Commissioner Shipley, yeah. So it's
commission?
No, I mean the other boards. So I think this evening we accepted on consent the minutes of planning from a month ago. But I think we actually did already see some of those projects move forward on our consent. So I just wanted to make sure that since the minutes are available on video, it's all out there for the public, that the written minutes maybe don't mean as much as they used to. Because I would definitely have a hard time voting on something if I had no access to the minutes or the video, but we have the video pretty quickly.
This is Sherry Reedman, City Clerk. We can certainly reach out to the staff liaisons on those boards. There are some minutes that we just post that are obviously boards we don't have a staff liaison on, but about getting those uploaded in a timelier manner.
Commissioner Shipley, okay, thank you. Mayor, I got some more stuff though. Since we were talking about HRC and being reminded that they had other things they could have been investigating as part of their duties, I did kind of want to point out something people forget about a lot. It's one of my favorite things. It's Oak Hill Cemetery. It is a historic cemetery. It is on the historic register. It is under the purview of Parks and Rec, and very rarely does anyone ask HRC or anyone on HRC if they're doing everything they need to be to protect that particular historic resource. So as long as people are passing notes to Historic Resource Commission and reevaluating what historic markers we have, I would love to hear them give a little more attention to what I think is a really amazing asset to our town historically.
Ms. Mayor Nanda, you muted yourself.
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, the last thing. It kind of touched on what we were speaking about tonight, but I also felt like it would be a tangent and I didn't want to steal into the wrong space. But as we mentioned with the Shunganugara NAACP marker, the young rice man, that, well, maybe not that, but that space where the park, Robinson Park, and that whole gateway to our city, it seems like it could be a really good space for that kind of reflection. That used to be, I understand, where the jail was. It still belongs to the county, although we mow it. When we were talking at the downtown master planning, there was a little bit of talk about how that whole section could be made far more inviting. And I just think if we could make that a space where we're talking about marginalized communities, that would be kind of interesting. My only concern, and I know this was the concern of the NAACP group, was that it's maybe a little bit difficult to get to. So it might be more visible on the city hall side, which is probably true. But then that sort of kind of got my mind going, what if it was more accessible? And I understand there's some plans out there where the loop might reach that space a little bit easier. I just wondered if it would be a good community discussion about rethinking that gateway to our town and thinking about it from that perspective. And I didn't mention it, but we did get some correspondence from Dave Lowenstein, the artist, where he kind of talked about, I'd never heard of it. It's some monument art group where they combine art and history, and they kind of have a formula for how to do that. I found that very interesting. I was very grateful to learn about that. So I don't know, does anyone else think that would be a good physical space to have community conversations around?
This is Mayor Ananda. I think that it is absolutely worthwhile to have a community conversation around that. I also want to acknowledge the risk then of like segregating out those monuments that address our problematic history with race, our racist history, to be more accurate with my words. And so I do think that it isn't something for the commission to necessarily just talk about. Additionally, we have to acknowledge that it's not our property. So there's that piece of things too. But how can we collaborate and come together as a community to have a real conversation about that? And it's not just an either or. Either you are concentrated in this place or you are dispersed. It could very much be either there is a concentration that happens to be in this place and there are other relevant and important locations that we need to acknowledge. For me, that's kind of my first brush reaction to that.
I just want to say, I was thinking about the whole intersection. So living here for 30 years, sometimes you drive past something and you don't really realize it could use an update. And probably now when you guys drive by there tomorrow, you will realize what I'm talking about. I just my mind went bigger places than just, oh, there's this tiny park. I felt like there could be a creative space, a bigger space that went across the street and on the other corner. So that was and I'm glad you brought that up, because that was my concern when they were talking about the NAACP, is it's just kind of in a corner and you might not know about it. And I didn't know I know how I felt about it. I didn't feel good about it. But I actually think the fact that the county owns it makes it an opportunity, because they are our partner and they are also in these spaces. And I don't know, I think it could be something fun and inspirational. I just want to check with you guys.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldei. I would say that as part of the downtown master planning process, I thought there was a lot of good conversation about not only that particular area, but how you get access to the river in various aspects. And so I certainly hope as we get further into the downtown master plan that we're kind of reimagining not only as you say, bigger than that Robinson Park, several of our parks along there, as well as, along the river. I think it's something it's definitely underutilized. That whole stretch is underutilized.
This is Mayor Nanda. Commissioner Shipley, do you feel like that adequately addresses your comments?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other items from commissioners? Okay, I think we are ready to move forward to the city manager's report.
City Manager Craig Owens, thank you, Mayor. There are 4 items here. I won't go through all of them. The first one is was a suggestion that we got that the commissioners would like a little more lead time on understanding when ex parte communication reporting might be initiated. So this gives you that, and I think we're going to start, we will do that on a routine basis so that you have some guidance on these are the items that are coming towards you and that you would want to maintain it on. So appreciation to Planning Development Services for that. The sales tax report obviously is notable. We're watching these very, very closely, and matching them against our initial projections that have, pretty broad implications on this current fiscal year and next fiscal year and our fund balances. So I would say it is better than anticipated or than modeled, but there's a lot of time yet ahead, and as the pandemic started to take effect on various businesses, we'll continue to monitor that. But it was good news, so we shouldn't underplay that it wasn't good news. It was not as bad a news as we were braced for, which also reflects on the businesses themselves, and I think that's also noteworthy too. Is that the sales for some businesses have continued to maintain at least a reasonable pace. The rest are the only other thing is the last one. I would say, as you're aware, we're undertaking an economic development strategic plan, and the consultant is underway. Their process is underway of community conversations, and there are a lot of meetings that are scheduled, and also a lot of open meetings and conversations with any stakeholder to be interested in coming in there. And like all things, we are working very intentionally towards equity and bringing perspectives in that maybe had not been considered before or considered appropriately before. So that is a special part of this study and ever study going forward. Happy to answer any questions.
Mayor Nanda, thank you. Are there any questions for Craig? We didn't have anybody signed up for public comment on this item. Is there anybody in the commission room to give public comment, reporter?
No, Mayor.
Mayor Nanda, thank you. Anything else on the city manager's report? Okay, we are ready to move on to the calendar. Anything to add? Then we are ready to adjourn.
Commissioner Larson, I move to adjourn.
Vice Mayor Finkeldei, second.
Mayor Nanda, we have a motion from Commissioner Larson, a second from Vice Mayor Finkeldei. Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Finkeldei?
Aye.
Commissioner Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Mayor Nanda, aye. Passes unanimously. See you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you.